Once upon a time in a distant land there lived a poor woodcutter named Ali Baba. He and his wife struggled to make ends meet, while his wealthy brother, Cassim, lived in luxury. One day, while chopping wood in the forest, Ali Baba overheard a group of 40 thieves approaching a large rock. Hiding behind a tree, he watched as their leader stepped forward and uttered the magical words. "Open, Sesame." To Ali Baba's amazement, the rock split open, revealing a hidden cave filled with gold, jewels, and treasures. The thieves entered the cave, and after a while, they came back out. The leader then spoke again. "Close, Sesame." The rock sealed shut, and the thieves rode away. Excited, Ali Baba approached the rock and repeated the magic words. "Open, Sesame." The cave opened, and he stepped inside. Before him lay vast piles of treasure. Knowing he could not take everything, he filled his bags with as much gold as he could carry and left, sealing the cave behind him. Cassim's greed. Back home, Ali Baba told his wife about the treasure. She borrowed a scale from Cassim's wife to measure the gold. Curious, Cassim's wife placed wax at the bottom of the scale. When Ali Baba returned it, she found a gold coin stuck to it and immediately told Cassim. Overcome with greed, Cassim demanded Ali Baba reveal the secret. Ali Baba, being a kind-hearted man, told him about the cave. Cassim rushed to the cave with a mule, eager to take as much treasure as possible. He said, "Open, Sesame." The cave opened, and Cassim stepped inside. However, in his greed, he forgot the magic words to exit. When the thieves returned, they found him trapped and killed him. When Cassim did not return, Ali Baba went to search for him and was heartbroken to find his brother dead. With the help of Morgiana, Cassim's clever servant, they brought his body home and arranged for a proper burial without arousing suspicion. The thieves' revenge. The thieves soon discovered that someone else knew their secret. Their leader devised a plan to find the intruder. He disguised himself as an oil merchant and came to Ali Baba's house, hiding his men inside large oil jars. However, Morgiana, ever watchful, discovered the trick. As night fell, she took a pot of boiling oil and poured it into each jar, killing the thieves inside. When the leader entered the house, she performed a dagger dance and, in a swift move, stabbed him, saving Ali Baba's life. Happily ever after. Ali Baba was grateful for Morgiana's bravery and married her to his son. With the thieves gone, he remained the only one who knew the secret of the treasure and used it wisely to help his family and the poor. And so, Ali Baba and his family lived happily ever after, proving that honesty and kindness triumph over greed and evil. The Seven Ravens, a German fairy tale. Once upon a time, there was a man who had 7 sons and longed for a daughter. When his wife finally gave birth to a little girl, the child was weak and small, and the parents feared she would not survive. To save her, the father sent his 7 sons to fetch water from the well. In their haste, the boys accidentally dropped the jug into the deep well. Afraid of returning home empty-handed, they hesitated. The father, impatient and worried, thought his sons had abandoned their task. In his anger, he cursed them, crying out, "I wish you were ravens," and flew away. No sooner had the words left his lips than his sons transformed into 7 black ravens and flew into the sky. The parents regretted the curse, but it was too late, there was no way to undo it. The little girl grew up without knowing about her brothers until she overheard villagers talking about her family's sorrow. She became determined to save her brothers. After learning their fate, she set out on a long and perilous journey, carrying nothing but a small ring from her parents as a token of love. She traveled far, reaching the end of the world where the sun, moon, and stars dwelled. The sun was too hot and scorching, the moon was cold and unkind, but the stars, kind and gentle, gave her a bone from a chicken's foot, telling her it was the key to the glass mountain where her brothers lived. When she arrived at the glass mountain, she found its entrance locked. In her despair, she cut off her little finger and used it as a key, opening the door. Inside, she found a table set with food and drink for 7. She ate a little from each plate and drank from each cup, dropping her parents' ring into the last cup. Soon, the 7 ravens returned. As they prepared to eat, they noticed someone had been there. When the youngest raven found the ring, he recognized it as their parents and said, "If only our sister were here, we would be free." Hearing this, the girl stepped forward, and the moment her brothers saw her, they regained their human forms. Reunited, they joyfully returned home, where their parents welcomed them with tears of happiness. And so, the family was whole again, and they all lived happily ever after. Once upon a time, in a small village, there lived a kind-hearted girl named Lily. She lived with her mother, and though they were poor, they were happy. One day, while walking through the forest to gather berries, Lily met an old woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "My dear child," the old woman said, "you are kind and generous. I have a gift for you." She handed Lily a small pot and whispered, "This is a magic porridge pot. Whenever you are hungry, simply say, 'Cook, little pot, cook,' and it will fill with delicious, warm porridge. When you have had enough, say, 'Stop, little pot, stop,' and it will stop cooking." Lily thanked the old woman and hurried home. That evening, she tried the pot. "Cook, little pot, cook," she said. At once, the pot began bubbling and filled with sweet porridge. She and her mother ate until they were full, and then Lily said, "Stop, little pot, stop," and the pot stopped cooking. From that day on, Lily and her mother never went hungry. One day, while Lily was out, her mother felt hungry and decided to use the pot. "Cook, little pot, cook," she said. The pot began to fill with porridge. But when the pot was full, she realized she did not know how to stop it. The porridge kept bubbling and overflowing. It spilled onto the table, onto the floor, and out the door. Soon, the entire house was filled with porridge. It flowed into the street, covering the village paths, and people ran in all directions, unable to stop the growing sea of porridge. When Lily returned home, she saw the chaos and quickly called out, "Stop, little pot, stop." At once, the pot stopped cooking. The villagers had to eat porridge for days until the streets were finally cleared. Though they laughed about it later, everyone in the village learned to be careful with magic. And from that day on, Lily and her mother always made sure to use the pot wisely. And so, they lived happily ever after. Once upon a time, a poor fisherman and his wife lived in a small hut near the sea. Every day, the fisherman went to catch fish while his wife stayed at home. One day, the fisherman cast his net and caught a large flounder. But this was no ordinary fish, it spoke. "Please let me go," the fish begged. "I am an enchanted prince. If you set me free, I will grant you any wish." The kind fisherman was amazed but humble. He let the fish go and returned home. When he told his wife about the magical fish, she was furious. "Why didn't you ask for something?" she scolded. "Go back and ask for a nice cottage instead of this old hut." The fisherman, though reluctant, went back to the shore and called out to the fish. "Oh, enchanted fish in the sea! Hear my wish and grant it to me. My wife is not content, you see. She wants a cottage, please let it be." The fish rose from the water and replied, "Go home. Your wish is granted." Sure enough, when the fisherman returned, their old hut had turned into a lovely cottage. His wife was delighted, for a while. A few days later, she demanded more. "A cottage is too small. Go back and ask for a grand castle." The fisherman hesitated but obeyed. He called upon the fish again, and soon, they had a grand castle. But the wife was still not satisfied. "I want to be queen." "Go and tell the fish," she ordered. The fisherman returned to the shore, feeling uneasy. But the fish granted the wish, and his wife became queen. Yet, her greed only grew. "I want to be empress," she demanded next. The fish granted the wish. "Now I want to rule the sun, moon, and stars," she declared. This time, when the fisherman called the fish, the sea turned dark and stormy. The fish replied, "Go home." she is back in her old hut. When the fisherman returned, he found his wife sitting in their original small hut. Everything they had wished for was gone. From that day on, they lived as they had before, poor but wiser, knowing that greed only leads to loss. Moral: be content with what you have, for greed can take away even what you were given. Once upon a time, there was a kind and beautiful girl who lived with her cruel mother and selfish sister. The mother adored her elder daughter, who was just as mean-spirited as she was, but despised the younger girl, treating her like a servant. One day, the kind girl was sent to fetch water from a distant well. As she filled her jug, an old woman, weak and thirsty, asked for a drink. The girl, full of compassion, offered her fresh water without hesitation. The old woman, who was actually a fairy in disguise, smiled and said, "Because of your kindness, I grant you a gift. Every time you speak, flowers and precious gems shall fall from your lips." Astonished but grateful, the girl returned home. As soon as she spoke, diamonds, pearls, and roses tumbled from her mouth. Her greedy mother, seeing this magic, demanded to know what had happened. When she learned of the fairy's blessing, she sent her elder daughter to the same well, hoping for a similar gift. But when the elder daughter arrived, she met a noble lady instead of an old woman. The lady, also the fairy in disguise, asked for a drink. The rude girl, arrogant and selfish, refused, saying, "Get your own water." The fairy, displeased, replied, "For your cruelty, I curse you. Every time you speak, toads and snakes shall fall from your mouth." When the girl returned home and spoke, disgusting creatures leaped from her lips. Horrified, the mother blamed the younger daughter and chased her away. Wandering alone, the kind girl met a prince, who was captivated by her gentle nature and the jewels that fell from her lips. He married her, and they lived in happiness and wealth. As for the elder sister, her curse made her so unbearable that even her own mother cast her out. She wandered miserably, rejected by all, and lived in loneliness. And so, kindness was rewarded, and selfishness was punished, proving that true beauty comes from within. Once upon a time, a soldier was returning home from war. On his way, he met an old witch who asked him, "Would you like to be rich?" The soldier, having little money, eagerly said yes. The witch led him to a hollow tree and told him, "Climb down into the trunk. You will find 3 chambers filled with treasures. In the first room, there's a chest guarded by a dog with eyes as big as teacups. In the second, a dog with eyes as big as mill wheels. And in the third, a dog with eyes as big as towers. But do not be afraid. Place my apron on the ground, and the dogs will sit still." She continued, "You may take as many coins as you like, but you must bring me only one thing, the tinderbox inside the last room." The soldier agreed and climbed into the tree. He found the first room, where he calmed the dog with the apron and filled his pockets with copper coins. In the second room, he found silver coins and replaced the copper. In the third room, he saw the giant-eyed dog and grabbed gold coins, stuffing them into his bags. Finally, he found the tinderbox. Curious, he asked, "Why do you want this old box?" The witch refused to tell him. Suspicious, the soldier took out his sword and said, "Tell me, or I'll strike you down." Still, the witch refused. So, the soldier killed her, took the tinderbox, and climbed out of the tree. Now incredibly rich, he bought fine clothes and lived in luxury. However, he soon wasted all his money and remembered the tinderbox. One night, he struck the tinderbox, and suddenly, the dog with teacup-sized eyes appeared. "What do you wish, master?" asked the dog. The soldier realized that striking the tinderbox once summoned the first dog, twice summoned the second, and 3 times summoned the third, the most powerful one. With their help, he became rich again. One day, he heard about a beautiful princess locked in a castle. The king had forbidden anyone from seeing her. Curious, the soldier used the tinderbox to summon a dog and ordered it to bring the princess to him while she slept. The princess was amazed when she saw the soldier but was taken back to the castle before morning. The next night, he repeated the trick. However, the queen suspected something was happening and tied a small bag of flour to the princess's back to leave a trail. The next morning, the king and queen followed the flour trail and found the soldier. He was arrested and sentenced to death. On the day of his execution, he asked for one last wish, to smoke a pipe. The king allowed it. The soldier struck his tinderbox 3 times, summoning all 3 dogs. The dogs attacked the guards, frightened the king and queen, and threw them into the air. With the king and queen gone, the people cheered and declared the soldier their new king. He married the princess, and together they ruled the kingdom happily ever after, thanks to the magical tinderbox. Once upon a time, there was a poor little girl named Karen. She had no shoes and walked barefoot until, one day, a kind old shoemaker gave her a pair of red shoes made from scraps of fabric. Though they were not perfect, Karen loved them with all her heart. One day, Karen's mother passed away, and a rich old lady took her in. The lady treated her well, but she was strict and did not allow Karen to have pretty things. When it was time for Karen's confirmation at church, she saw a beautiful pair of red shoes in a shop window. She became obsessed with them, and despite knowing that simple black shoes were proper for church, she convinced the old lady to buy her the red ones. On the day of her confirmation, Karen wore the red shoes to church. Everyone was shocked, because such bright shoes were not appropriate. But Karen could not stop admiring them. Even as she prayed, her mind was on her beautiful shoes. One day, a mysterious old soldier with a red beard saw Karen in her shoes and tapped them, saying, "Oh, what lovely dancing shoes." From that moment on, the shoes were enchanted. At a grand ball, Karen put on her red shoes and began to dance. But when she tried to stop, she couldn't. The shoes forced her to dance and twirl, carrying her out of the ballroom, across fields, into the dark woods. She was terrified. No matter how hard she tried, she could not take them off. She danced through day and night, past villages and towns. She begged for help, but no one could stop the shoes. Finally, exhausted and desperate, Karen found herself at the house of the town executioner. She cried, "Please, cut off my shoes. Cut off my feet if you must, just free me from this curse." The executioner took his sharp axe and, with a heavy heart, chopped off Karen's feet. The red shoes, still dancing, carried her severed feet away into the distance. Now crippled and full of regret, Karen sought forgiveness. She prayed deeply and sincerely. Over time, she found peace in her heart and learned the value of humility. One day, when she was truly repentant, an angel appeared before her and granted her eternal rest. Her soul was carried to heaven, where she finally found happiness. Moral of the story: vanity and obsession with material things can lead to downfall, but true repentance and humility can bring redemption. Would you like me to adapt the story in a different way or summarize it further? Smiling face with smiling eyes. Once upon a time in a faraway land, a merchant had a beautiful daughter named Vasilisa. Her mother loved her dearly and, before passing away, gave her a magical doll, telling her, "Whenever you need help, feed this doll a little food, and it will guide you." Vasilisa's father remarried, but her stepmother and stepsisters were cruel and jealous of her beauty and kindness. They made her work all day and tried to make her life miserable. Despite this, Vasilisa remained gentle and kind, for her doll always comforted and helped her. One day, when Vasilisa's father was away, the stepmother devised a wicked plan. She deliberately let their house's fire go out and then ordered Vasilisa to go into the dark forest to ask Baba Yaga, the fearsome witch, for a light. The journey to Baba Yaga's hut. Trembling with fear, Vasilisa took her doll and ventured into the dark woods. The trees whispered ominously, and the wind howled like a warning. After a long journey, she finally found Baba Yaga's house, a strange hut standing on giant chicken legs, which spun around whenever the witch commanded. Vasilisa, summoning her courage, called out, "Oh, grandmother, please grant me a light." Baba Yaga, with her long nose, iron teeth, and wild hair, stepped out and cackled, "I will give you a light, but only if you work for me first." Vasilisa's impossible tasks. Baba Yaga gave Vasilisa impossible chores, sorting grains from dirt, weaving a cloth, and cleaning the house until it shone. But every time Vasilisa fed her doll a little bread, it whispered advice and magically completed the tasks. Baba Yaga was astonished. "How did you finish these tasks so well?" she asked. Vasilisa replied humbly, "With my mother's blessing." Hearing this, Baba Yaga shrieked, "I want nothing to do with anyone blessed," and ordered Vasilisa to leave. Before she left, Baba Yaga handed her a skull lantern with burning eyes as a source of light. The return and justice. Vasilisa hurried home, carrying the skull lantern. When she arrived, the burning eyes glowed fiercely and fixed themselves on her cruel stepmother and stepsisters. They tried to escape, but the fiery skull burned them to ashes. Now free, Vasilisa lived peacefully and later caught the eye of the Tsar, who fell in love with her beauty and wisdom. They married, and she ruled wisely by his side, never forgetting the little magical doll that had helped her through her trials. And so, Vasilisa's kindness and courage triumphed, while Baba Yaga's dark magic was outwitted. The end. Would you like a different version or more details on any part? Smiling face with smiling eyes. Once upon a time in Russia, a merchant had a daughter named Vasilisa. She was beautiful, kind, and wise. When she was still a child, her mother fell ill and, before passing away, gave Vasilisa a small wooden doll. "Keep this doll with you always," her mother said. "Feed it a little and ask for help, and it will guide you." After her mother's death, Vasilisa's father remarried a woman with 2 daughters of her own. The stepmother and stepsisters were cruel and jealous of Vasilisa's beauty and kindness. They made her do all the chores, but no matter how hard they tried to break her spirit, she remained cheerful, for the doll secretly helped her with all her tasks. One day, the merchant had to leave on a long journey. Seizing the opportunity, the wicked stepmother moved Vasilisa and her stepsisters to a house at the edge of a dark forest, where the fearsome witch Baba Yaga lived. One night, the stepmother purposely let the fire in their house go out and ordered Vasilisa to go into the forest and ask Baba Yaga for fire. Terrified but obedient, Vasilisa took her little doll and ventured into the dark woods. The doll comforted her and led her to Baba Yaga's hut, which stood on giant chicken legs and could turn on command. The skulls around the fence glowed eerily, lighting up the night. Baba Yaga, an old hag with iron teeth, welcomed Vasilisa but said she would only give her fire if she completed 3 impossible tasks. Sorting grains, Baba Yaga mixed a huge pile of wheat, poppy seeds, and millet and ordered Vasilisa to separate them by morning. Cleaning the house, she had to sweep the yard, clean the hut, and prepare a meal for Baba Yaga and her pets. Spinning fine thread, finally, she had to spin fine linen into a delicate cloth. Overwhelmed, Vasilisa turned to her doll. Each time, the doll whispered instructions and worked through the night, completing the tasks flawlessly. Baba Yaga was amazed, but also suspicious. "How did you do this, girl?" the witch asked. "With my mother's blessing," Vasilisa replied. At the mention of a blessing, Baba Yaga grew furious. She detested anything pure or blessed and immediately drove Vasilisa away. However, she kept her promise and gave her a glowing skull filled with fire. Vasilisa carried the fiery skull home. As soon as she arrived, the skull's fire flared up and burned the wicked stepmother and her daughters to ashes. Vasilisa was finally free. She later moved to the city, where she worked as a weaver. Her beauty and skill caught the eye of the Tsar, who fell in love with her and made her his queen. Vasilisa and her doll lived happily ever after, always remembering the kindness of her late mother. The Magic Paintbrush, a Chinese fairy tale. Once upon a time, in a small village in China, there lived a kind and humble boy named Ma Liang. He was poor, but had a deep love for painting. However, he could not afford a brush, so he would use sticks and stones to draw on the ground, dreaming that one day he could bring his artwork to life. The gift of the magic paintbrush one night, as Ma Liang fell asleep after a long day of drawing in the dirt, an old man appeared in his dreams. The man handed him a beautiful golden paintbrush and said, "Use this brush wisely. It has great power." When Ma Liang woke up, he was amazed to find the golden paintbrush lying beside him. Eager to test it, he dipped the brush in ink and painted a bird on the ground. To his astonishment, the bird flapped its wings and flew away. He realized that whatever he painted with the brush would come to life. Helping the poor Ma Liang used his magic brush to help the villagers. He painted food for the hungry, oxen for the farmers, and a river to bring water to the dry fields. The people were grateful, and Ma Liang was happy to use his gift for good. The greedy emperor word of Ma Liang's magical abilities soon spread to the emperor, a greedy and cruel man who lived in a grand palace. He ordered his soldiers to capture Ma Liang and bring him to the palace. The emperor demanded, "Paint me a mountain of gold at once." But Ma Liang refused, saying, "The brush is meant to help the needy, not to fulfill selfish desires." Enraged, the emperor threw Ma Liang into prison and took the magic brush for himself. However, when the emperor tried to paint, nothing came to life. Furious, he ordered Ma Liang to paint for him, threatening him with punishment. Outsmarting the emperor, Ma Liang pretended to obey. He first painted a vast sea. The emperor, eager for his golden mountain, commanded, "Now paint a ship so I can sail across and find the gold." Ma Liang painted a magnificent ship, and the emperor, along with his ministers and soldiers, eagerly climbed aboard. Just as they reached the middle of the sea, Ma Liang painted a fierce storm. The waves rose high, and the wind howled, capsizing the ship and sending the greedy emperor and his men into the ocean. A happy ending with the emperor gone, Ma Liang returned to his village, using his magic paintbrush to help the people once more. He painted fields of rice, strong houses, and everything the villagers needed to live happily. Ma Liang continued to use his gift wisely, never for greed but always for kindness. And so, he lived a peaceful and fulfilling life, helping those in need with the power of his magic paintbrush. And from that day on, the village flourished, and Ma Liang's name was remembered for generations. The Bamboo Cutter and the Moon Child, the tale of the bamboo cutter. Long ago, in a quiet village in Japan, an elderly bamboo cutter named Taketori no Okina lived with his kind wife. Every day, he ventured into the forest to cut bamboo and sell it for a living. One day, while working, he noticed a strange, glowing stalk of bamboo. Curious, he carefully cut it open, and to his amazement, inside was a tiny, radiant baby girl, no larger than his hand. Filled with joy, he took the child home, and he and his wife decided to raise her as their own. They named her Kagayahime, meaning radiant princess. From that day on, every time the bamboo cutter chopped bamboo, he found gold and precious gems inside, bringing them great wealth. Kagayahime's beauty and suitors. As Kagayahime grew, she became extraordinarily beautiful, unlike anyone in the world. News of her beauty spread far and wide, and soon, noblemen and princes from across the land came to ask for her hand in marriage. However, Kagayahime did not wish to marry and devised impossible tasks for her suitors. Each noble was given a challenge. Prince Ishizukuri was to bring the Buddha's stone bowl from India. Prince Kuramochi had to retrieve a branch from the mythical jeweled tree of Mount Horai. Prince Abe no Mimuraji needed to find the legendary robe of fire rat fur from China. Prince Otomo no Miyuki had to retrieve a colored jewel from a dragon's neck. Prince Isanokami no Maro was asked to bring a cowrie shell hidden inside a swallow's nest. Each of them failed, some tried to trick her with fake treasures, while others perished in their attempts. The emperor's love and the truth revealed. Even the emperor of Japan, Mikado, heard of Kagayahime's beauty and visited her. Though he was deeply in love, she gently refused him, saying she did not belong to this world. As time passed, Kagayahime grew sadder each night, gazing at the moon. One evening, she finally revealed the truth to her foster parents: she was not of this world but from the Moon Kingdom. Her time on Earth was coming to an end, and she must return when the full moon rose. The bamboo cutter and his wife wept, unwilling to let their beloved daughter go. The emperor sent guards to protect her, but when the moonlit night arrived, celestial beings descended from the sky. A radiant light surrounded Kagayaheim, and though she longed to stay, she put on the celestial robe they brought, which erased all her earthly memories. Before leaving, she wrote a farewell letter to the emperor and left behind the elixir of immortality, but he refused to drink it, as life without her held no meaning. Instead, he ordered it to be burned on the highest mountain in Japan, Mount Fuji. It is said that the smoke from the elixir still rises from its peak to this day. And thus, Princess Kaguya returned to the moon, leaving behind only the memories of her time on Earth, her kindness, and the love she shared with those who cherished her. Legacy of the Tale. This ancient legend, known as the Tale of the Bamboo Cutter, Taketori Monogatari, is considered Japan's oldest surviving fairy tale and has inspired many stories, including modern adaptations in film and literature. Long ago, on the mountain of flowers and fruit, a magical stone lay untouched by time. One day, the stone cracked open, and from it sprang a monkey, full of life and curiosity. The animals of the mountain took him in, and he soon became their king, known as Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. The quest for immortality. Though he ruled joyfully, Sun Wukong feared death. He set out on a journey to learn the secret of immortality. He found a wise Taoist master, who taught him powerful magic. The 72 transformations, allowing him to change into animals and objects. The cloud somersault, letting him travel 108,000 miles in a single leap. The golden gaze, which let him see through illusions. Sun Wukong trained hard and, through trickery, also learned how to erase his name from the Book of Life and Death. No longer bound by mortality, he returned to his kingdom, stronger than ever. The Havoc in Heaven. Soon, Sun Wukong's mischief caught the attention of the Jade Emperor, ruler of heaven. To keep him in check, the emperor invited him to heaven, giving him the title of Keeper of the Heavenly Stables, a lowly position. Furious at the insult, Sun Wukong declared himself great sage, equal to heaven, and caused chaos in the celestial palace. The gods sent warriors to stop him, but none could defeat him. Even the mighty Erlangshen, a god of war, struggled against the Monkey King's cunning tricks. Seeing no other choice, the Jade Emperor called upon Buddha himself. The Trap of the Buddha. Buddha challenged Sun Wukong. If you can leap out of my palm, you may rule heaven. Confident, the Monkey King somersaulted far away. He landed in what he thought was the end of the universe and marked the spot with his name. But when he turned back, he found himself still in Buddha's palm. He had never truly left. With a wave of his hand, Buddha flipped his palm, pressing Sun Wukong under a giant mountain, 5 Elements Mountain. There, the Monkey King remained trapped for 500 years, unable to move. The Journey to Redemption. One day, the wise monk Tang Sanzang passed by. He was traveling west to bring sacred Buddhist scriptures back to China. Buddha decreed that Sun Wukong could be freed if he protected the monk on his journey. Given a magical golden headband, which tightened whenever he disobeyed, Sun Wukong reluctantly joined the monk. Along the way, they faced powerful demons, deadly trials, and fierce enemies. Through loyalty and courage, the Monkey King slowly learned wisdom and compassion. After years of trials, Sun Wukong completed the journey, proving himself worthy. In the end, Buddha granted him enlightenment, and he ascended to become the victorious fighting Buddha. The legend lives on. Sun Wukong's tale of mischief, power, and redemption remains one of China's greatest legends. The Monkey King, once wild and rebellious, became a true hero, his story inspiring countless generations. Once upon a time, the sun, the moon, and the wind were 3 siblings. They lived in the sky with their mother, the kind and gentle Star Mother. One day, the sun, the moon, and the wind were invited to a grand feast in a distant part of the sky. Their mother, the star, could not go with them, but she said, "My dear children, enjoy the feast, but do not forget your mother. Bring back something for me to eat." The three siblings happily set off and reached the feast. The hosts had prepared a lavish spread with the most delicious food. There were golden fruits, fragrant rice, sweet honey, and cool, refreshing drinks. The sun and the wind were greedy and selfish. They ate heartily, stuffing themselves with all the delicious food. They were so busy enjoying the meal that they completely forgot about their mother. Not once did they think of saving anything for her. But the moon was different. She was kind and thoughtful. She carefully set aside the best and sweetest portions of the meal for their mother. She wrapped them in a silver cloth and carried them home. When they returned, the star mother eagerly asked, "What did you bring for me, my children?" The son laughed and said, "Oh, mother, I was so hungry and the food was so delicious that I forgot to bring anything for you." The wind carelessly said, "I enjoyed myself so much at the feast that I didn't remember to save anything for you." But the moon stepped forward and placed the food she had saved before their mother. "Here, mother," she said sweetly, "I did not forget you. I brought you the finest food from the feast." The star mother was touched by the moon's kindness, but she was also disappointed in the sun and the wind. "You, my sons," she said sternly, "were selfish and did not think of me. Because of this, you will be punished." She turned to the sun and said, "You, sun, will burn fiercely in the sky. Your light will be hot and harsh, and people will not be able to look at you for long." Then she turned to the wind and said, "And you, wind, will always blow with force and dryness, bringing dust and storms wherever you go." Finally, she turned to the moon with a loving smile and said, "You, my daughter, were kind and thoughtful. As a reward, your light will be soft and gentle. People will love you and look at you with admiration. Your glow will bring comfort in the darkness." And so, from that day on, the sun blazed hot and fierce, the wind blew dry and restless, and the moon shone with a soft and soothing glow. That is why, even today, the sun and the wind are harsh, but the moon remains gentle and kind. The end. Sun with face crescent moon dashing away sparkles. Once upon a time, in a quiet Japanese village, there lived an old couple who had no children. One day, while the old woman was washing clothes by the river, she saw a giant peach floating downstream. Curious and excited, she pulled the peach from the water and brought it home. When the old man returned from the fields, they prepared to cut open the peach to eat. But as soon as they did, to their amazement, a baby boy emerged from inside. The couple was overjoyed, and since he was born from a peach, Momo in Japanese, they named him Momotaro, Peach Boy. As the years passed, Momotaro grew into a strong and kind young man. One day, he learned that a group of Oni, demons, lived on Oni Island, terrorizing nearby villages by stealing food and treasures. Determined to stop them, Momotaro decided to set off on a journey to defeat the demons. His kind-hearted parents made him delicious kibi dango, millet dumplings, for his journey, and he set off with a brave heart. Along the way, he met a dog, a monkey, and a pheasant. Each of them was hungry, so Momotaro offered them his kibi dango. Grateful, the animals pledged their loyalty to him and joined his mission. Finally, they reached Oni Island. With the pheasant flying ahead to scout, the monkey climbing the walls, and the dog leading the charge, they fought bravely against the fierce demons. The battle was intense, but Momotaro and his loyal friends were strong and clever. They defeated the Oni chief and made the demons promise to never harm people again. Momotaro and his companions gathered the stolen treasures and returned to the village as heroes. The old couple and the villagers celebrated his bravery, and from that day on, Momotaro lived happily with his family, remembered forever as Japan's bravest boy born from a peach. The Boy Who Drew Cats, a Japanese fairy tale. Once upon a time in a small village in Japan, there was a poor farmer who had many children. Among them was a small, frail boy who was not strong enough to help with the hard labor of farming. His parents decided that he should become a priest instead, hoping he would have a better life in a temple. When the boy was sent to a monastery to train, the priest there noticed something peculiar about him. He was more interested in drawing than in studying or meditating. He spent all his time sketching cats on the walls, on paper, and even in books. No matter how often he was scolded, he couldn't stop drawing cats. One day, the priest, realizing the boy was not suited for priesthood, gently advised him to leave and find another path in life. Before the boy left, the priest gave him one piece of advice: avoid large places at night. Stay in small places. With those words in mind, the boy wandered through the countryside, not knowing where to go. Eventually, he came upon a large, abandoned temple in a nearby village. The people of the village told him that a terrible goblin or demon had taken over the temple, and no one dared to enter. The boy, however, was not afraid. He entered the temple and found it empty. He noticed the large blank walls and, unable to resist, began drawing cats all over them. He soon became tired and remembered the priest's warning. So instead of sleeping in the large hall, he found a small cupboard and curled up inside. In the middle of the night, he was awakened by loud, terrifying noises, the sound of a great battle. Screams, growls, and crashes echoed through the temple. The boy trembled in fear but stayed hidden inside the cupboard. After a long time, silence fell. When morning came, he cautiously stepped out. To his amazement, the temple floor was covered in the remains of a giant goblin. And all around the walls, the cats he had drawn had now come to life. Their tiny mouths were stained with blood, and their eyes gleamed. They had defeated the demon. The villagers were overjoyed when they learned that the temple was safe again. They hailed the boy as a hero, and from that day on, he understood that his gift of drawing was meant for something special. He continued drawing cats, but now, he was known as the boy whose art could bring life and protect others. And so, he lived happily, using his talent wisely. Moral of the story: talent, no matter how unusual, has a purpose. Believe in yourself, and always remember wise advice. Anansi the spider, the clever trickster. A long time ago in West Africa, there lived a clever spider named Anansi. Though small, he was known for his wit and cunning tricks. Anansi loved two things more than anything: wisdom and riches. But he did not always want to work for them, he preferred using his cleverness to get them with ease. The quest for wisdom. One day, Anansi decided that he wanted to collect all the wisdom in the world so that he could be the smartest creature. He traveled far and wide, visiting wise elders, scholars, and spirits, tricking them into giving him their knowledge. He stored all this wisdom inside a large gourd. Satisfied that he had gathered all the wisdom, he decided to hide it at the top of the tallest tree, so no one else could reach it. He tied the gourd to his stomach with a rope and began climbing. However, the gourd kept getting in the way, making it difficult for him to climb. Anansi's young son, watching from below, called out, "Father, wouldn't it be easier if you tied the gourd to your back instead of your stomach?" Anansi paused. It made sense. He followed the advice and easily climbed the tree. But then he stopped. How could his little son, who had no wisdom, think of something that he, the wisest creature, had not? Realizing that wisdom should be shared rather than hoarded, Anansi grew angry at himself. In frustration, he tipped over the gourd, and all the wisdom spilled out across the land. The wind carried it far and wide, spreading it among the people. That is why today, wisdom exists everywhere, and no one person has all of it. Tricking the sky god for riches. Though Anansi had lost his hoard of wisdom, he still wanted to be rich. One day, he learned that Niam, the sky god, owned all the stories in the world. Anansi wished to have these stories for himself and share them with the people. He went to Niam and asked, "How much will you sell your stories for?" Niam laughed and said, "Bring me 4 impossible things: a python, a leopard, hornets, and a fairy. Then, I will give you my stories." Anansi, using his cunning, set out on his challenge. Tricking the python, Anansi found a great python and said, "I heard that people say you are not the longest creature. The bamboo tree is longer." The python, offended, stretched himself out beside the bamboo to prove his length. As soon as he did, Anansi quickly tied him up and carried him to Niam. Catching the leopard, next, Anansi dug a deep hole and covered it with branches. When the leopard fell in, Anansi pretended to help, saying, "Here, grab this spine." But as soon as the leopard climbed up, Anansi tied him and took him to Niam. Fooling the hornets, Anansi filled a gourd with water and poured some on the hornet's nest. "It is raining," he shouted. "Come inside my gourd for shelter." The hornets flew in, and Anansi quickly sealed it shut. Capturing the fairy, lastly, Anansi carved a little wooden figure and covered it with sticky sap. Then, he placed it in the path of a fairy and insulted her. The fairy, angered, slapped the figure and got stuck. Anansi easily captured her and brought her to Niam. Impressed, Niam handed Anansi all the stories of the world, making him the first storyteller. Anansi shared these tales with the people, and that is why, even today, his stories continue to be told. Moral of the story: Anansi's tale teaches us that cleverness can overcome great challenges, but wisdom is meant to be shared. Through his tricks, Anansi became not only wealthy but also a great storyteller, ensuring that wisdom and stories would live on forever. Sedna, the sea goddess, an Inuit legend. Long ago, in a small Inuit village, there lived a beautiful young woman named Sedna. Though many strong hunters wished to marry her, she refused them all, for none could satisfy her heart. Her father, a kind but impatient man, grew frustrated with her stubbornness. One day, a mysterious stranger arrived at their village. He was a tall, handsome man dressed in fine furs, and he promised Sedna a life of comfort, warmth, and abundance. He told her that his home was filled with riches and that she would never go hungry. Enticed by his words, Sedna agreed to marry him and left with him in his kayak. But as they traveled across the icy waters, Sedna realized she had been deceived. The man was not a man at all, he was a bird spirit, a fulmar, disguised as a human. He took her to his desolate island, where she was forced to live in a cold, barren nest, eating nothing but raw fish. She cried in despair, longing for her father and the comforts of her home. Hearing of his daughter's misery, Sedna's father was filled with guilt. He set out in his kayak to rescue her, and when he arrived, he found her weak and sorrowful. Together, they fled across the sea, hoping to escape the bird spirit's wrath. But the fulmar was enraged when he discovered Sedna missing. He summoned a mighty storm, whipping the ocean into a furious frenzy. Waves crashed against the tiny kayak, threatening to overturn it. Terrified for his own life, Sedna's father did something unforgivable: he pushed Sedna overboard into the freezing waters. Desperate, she clung to the side of the boat, her fingers gripping the edge. But her father, blinded by fear, took his knife and cut off her fingers one by one. As they fell into the ocean, they transformed into the creatures of the sea: whales, seals, walruses, and fish. Sedna sank into the depths of the ocean, betrayed and abandoned. But she did not perish. Instead, she became something greater, a powerful goddess of the sea. Her hair flowed like dark seaweed, and her eyes held the sorrow of all who had ever suffered. From then on, she ruled over all marine life, deciding the fate of hunters and fishermen. The Inuit people say that when the sea is angry, it is because Sedna's hair has become tangled, and only a shaman brave enough to descend into the deep and comb her hair can calm her wrath. To this day, those who depend on the ocean honor Sedna, for she alone controls the creatures of the sea and determines whether they will grant their bounty to those who seek them. Thus, Sedna, once a helpless girl, became a goddess, a mother of the sea, never to be forgotten. The Little Match Girl. By Hans Christian Andersen. It was a bitterly cold New Year's Eve. Snowflakes danced through the darkening sky as evening fell upon the city. In the dim light of the street lamps, a little girl walked barefoot, shivering in the freezing air. She had been sent out to sell matches, but not a single one had been bought that day. Her tattered dress barely shielded her from the icy wind, and her small feet, red and numb from the cold, had no protection since she had lost her slippers, one to a carriage and the other to a mischievous boy. Now, she clutched a bundle of matches in her hands, too afraid to return home, for she had not earned a single coin. In desperation, she huddled in a corner between two houses, trying to shield herself from the cruel wind. Her tiny fingers trembled as she pulled out a match. She struck it against the wall, and suddenly, a warm flame flickered before her eyes. In its golden glow, she imagined a great iron stove, its heat reaching out to warm her frozen body. But as the match burned out, the stove disappeared, leaving her once again in the bitter cold. She struck another match. This time, the flames transformed into a vision of a grand feast. A table laden with roasted goose, steaming and golden, sat before her. Just as she reached out to take a bite, the light vanished, and the cold night swallowed the vision. She lit a third match. Before her appeared a magnificent Christmas tree, decorated with hundreds of twinkling lights and colorful ornaments. The tree shimmered in her eyes, and she felt a joy she had never known. But soon, the match burned down, and the vision faded. Then, as she struck another match, she saw something even more wonderful, a warm and loving face. It was her grandmother, the only person who had ever truly loved her, now gone from this world. As she gazed at the glowing match, she felt her grandmother's presence so strongly that she quickly lit all the remaining matches, desperate to keep the vision alive. Her grandmother smiled and extended her arms. The little girl felt herself lifted from the cold streets, no longer shivering, no longer in pain. She was warm and safe in her grandmother's embrace, floating higher and higher toward a place where hunger, cold, and suffering no longer existed. The next morning, as the city woke to a new year, passers-by found the little girl curled up in the corner, her face serene, her lips curved into a faint smile. The burnt-out matches lay scattered beside her. They did not know what she had seen before she closed her eyes forever. They only knew that, on that cold winter's night, the little match girl had found peace at last. The Nixie of the Millpond. Once upon a time, there was a poor miller who struggled to make ends meet. No matter how hard he worked, he could barely provide for his family. One day, while standing by the millpond in despair, a mysterious woman rose from the water. She was the Nixie, the water spirit of the pond. "You are troubled," she said in a soothing voice. "If you promise me what is just born in your house, I will make you rich and prosperous." The miller, thinking only of his business and not realizing what she meant, eagerly agreed. At that very moment, his wife had given birth to a son. Years passed, and the miller indeed became wealthy. But as his son grew into a fine young man, the miller remembered his fateful promise. Fear gripped him, for he knew that the Nixie would one day come for the boy. When the son was grown, he fell in love and married a kind and beautiful woman. One day, while walking near the millpond, the water spirit suddenly emerged and seized him, pulling him into the depths of the water. His wife waited and waited, but he did not return. Desperate, she set out on a journey to rescue him. An old wise woman advised her, "You must wear out 3 pairs of iron shoes, cut down a great iron tree, and weave a cloth from silken threads as fine as mist. Only then will you find the path to your husband." With determination, the young wife traveled far and wide, wearing down her iron shoes. She struggled, but she never gave up. Years passed, and she finally completed her impossible tasks. At last, she reached the millpond again, and on a full moon night, she saw the Nixie. The water spirit, bound by ancient magic, had to release the man if his wife could break the enchantment. The young woman followed the wise woman's final advice. She did not speak or look at her husband when he emerged from the water. Instead, she threw a golden comb into the water. The Nixie, distracted by the treasure, let him go. The couple fled as fast as they could, but the furious Nixie chased them. The wife then threw down a silver mirror, which turned into a great mountain between them. The Nixie struggled to cross it. Finally, she threw a golden spinning wheel, and it became an impassable lake. At last, the Nixie could not follow them, and the young man was freed forever. The couple returned home, where they lived in happiness, never going near the millpond again. And so, they lived joyfully, and the Nixie never troubled them again. The Girl Without Hands. Once upon a time in a small village in Germany, a poor miller lived with his beautiful and kind-hearted daughter. One day, the miller unknowingly made a terrible bargain. While cutting wood in the forest, a mysterious stranger approached him. The stranger, who was actually the devil in disguise, promised the miller great wealth if he would give him what stood behind his mill. Thinking it was only an old apple tree, the miller agreed without hesitation. However, when he returned home, his heart filled with dread, his daughter had been standing behind the mill. The next day, the devil came to claim his prize, but the girl was so pure and good that he could not touch her. Enraged, he demanded that the miller cut off her hands, thinking this would make her impure. The miller, blinded by fear and greed, obeyed. With tears in her eyes, the girl allowed her father to chop off her hands. But even without her hands, the girl remained pure, and the devil was still unable to take her. Furious, he vanished, leaving the girl with only her sorrow. Feeling betrayed by her father, she decided to leave home. She wandered through the forest, surviving on whatever she could find. One day, she reached a royal garden. Seeing delicious fruit hanging from a tree, she prayed for help. An angel appeared and guided her, allowing her to eat the fruit without touching it. The next morning, the king, who owned the garden, noticed that some fruit was missing. His guards discovered the girl and brought her before him. When the king saw her, he was moved by her sorrow and her pure heart. He took her to his castle, gave her silver hands, and, in time, married her. Years passed, and the girl gave birth to a son. But the devil was still determined to ruin her happiness. He tricked a messenger into delivering a false letter to the king, stating that his wife had given birth to a monstrous child. Another false message ordered that she and the baby be killed. The kind servants, however, could not bring themselves to harm her. Instead, they let her escape into the forest with her child. Guided once again by the angel, she found refuge in a small house, where she lived peacefully for many years. Meanwhile, the king returned from battle and discovered the deception. Heartbroken, he set off to find his wife and child. After a long search, he finally found them in the forest. Overjoyed, he embraced his wife, and at that moment, her hands miraculously grew back. With love and happiness restored, they returned to the kingdom, where they ruled wisely and lived happily ever after. The Singing Bone. A German fairy tale. Once upon a time in a faraway kingdom, a great wild boar was terrorizing the land, destroying crops and attacking travelers. The king, desperate to rid his land of the beast, proclaimed that whoever killed the boar would be rewarded with his daughter's hand in marriage and half the kingdom. Two brothers, one kind and honest, the other greedy and cruel, set out separately to hunt the beast. The younger brother, with a pure heart, encountered a wise old man who gave him a magical spear and advice on how to find the boar. With courage, the young man tracked the beast, fought bravely, and finally slew it. As he carried the carcass back to the king, his jealous older brother crossed his path. Pretending to be overjoyed, the elder brother tricked the younger into celebrating with him by a river. Then, driven by greed, he killed his own brother, buried his body beneath a bridge, and took the boar to the king as his own victory. The king, unaware of the treachery, fulfilled his promise, giving the elder brother the princess and half the kingdom. Years later, a wandering shepherd found a strange white bone by the riverbank. Intrigued, he carved it into a flute, but when he played, the flute sang a sorrowful tune. Oh shepherd, stop playing me! My brother killed me, and buried me here. He stole my prize and left me in fear." Shocked, the shepherd took the bone to the king, who listened to the eerie melody. The truth was revealed, and the elder brother was punished for his wickedness. The younger brother's remains were given a proper burial, and peace was restored to the land. And so, the buried moon. An English fairy tale. Long ago, in the wild, dark fens of England, the moon shone brightly each night, keeping travelers safe from the lurking evils that roamed the marshes. The people of the land were grateful, for they knew that in the moon's light, they were protected from the bogles, will-o'-the-wisps, and other creatures of the dark. One night, the moon herself grew curious about the dangers that threatened the people. She decided to take human form and walk among them, dressed in a long, flowing cloak of pale light. She wandered the marshes, stepping carefully over the pools of water and the tangled roots, observing the eerie shadows that moved in the darkness. As she explored, a thick cloud covered the sky, and the world was plunged into darkness. Suddenly, creatures of the night emerged from their hiding places, the bogles slithered from the mud, and the will-o'-the-wisps flickered with wicked laughter. Before the moon could flee, the creatures saw her glow and realized who she was. They rushed toward her, capturing her with their long, shadowy fingers. "We shall have no more meddling from you," they hissed, dragging her down into a deep, murky pool. There, beneath the black water, they bound her with chains of reeds and trapped her beneath a heavy stone. The moon struggled, but her light slowly faded, and the world above was left in endless darkness. Without the moon's light, the people of the fens suffered terribly. Travelers lost their way, and many vanished into the marshes, never to be seen again. Fear spread through the land, and soon, the elders realized that the moon was gone. One day, a brave man, who had once been saved by the moon's light, decided to seek her out. He gathered the people and told them of his dream, a dream in which a voice had whispered to him that the moon was buried beneath the marsh. Holding torches high, the villagers followed him into the darkened fens, searching for any sign of their lost guardian. At last, they came to a black pool where the water rippled strangely, though no wind blew. The brave man knelt beside it, and as he reached into the water, his hand brushed against something cold and smooth. With all his strength, he pushed away the heavy stone, and a soft glow began to rise from the depths. The moon, freed from her prison, rose into the sky once more, her silver light flooding the land. The bogles shrieked and fled, the will-o'-the-wisps vanished, and the marshes were safe again. The people rejoiced, vowing to always honor the moon's light. From that night on, whenever the moon shone full and bright, the people of the fens would whisper their gratitude, knowing she watched over them still. And so, the moon continued her nightly journey across the sky, never again daring to step into the marshes in human form. The Three Spinners. A German fairy tale. Once upon a time, in a small village, there lived a lazy girl who hated spinning. No matter how much her mother begged or scolded, she refused to do her work. One day, the mother became so frustrated that she beat her daughter and scolded her loudly. As fate would have it, the queen happened to pass by and overheard the commotion. The queen, curious about the situation, asked the mother what was wrong. Embarrassed by her daughter's laziness, the mother lied and said, "Your Majesty, my daughter is so diligent at spinning that I cannot provide enough flax for her to spin. She is never satisfied and always wants more." The queen, impressed by this claim, said, "What a wonderful girl. Bring her to my castle. I have plenty of flax, and I will reward her greatly if she spins it all." Before the girl could protest, the queen took her to the castle. She led the girl into a room filled with flax and said, "If you spin all of this into fine thread, I shall make you my daughter-in-law. But if you fail, you shall be punished." The girl was terrified. She knew she could not spin, and she sat down in despair, crying bitterly. Just then, three strange women appeared before her. Each had a peculiar feature. One had an enormous foot, another had a huge lower lip that hung down over her chin, and the third had a broad, flat thumb. "Why are you crying, dear child?" one of them asked. The girl explained her predicament. The three women smiled kindly and said, "Do not worry. If you promise to invite us to your wedding and call us your aunts, we will spin all the flax for you." Desperate, the girl agreed at once. The next day, the queen came to check on the work and was astonished to see the flax spun into the finest thread. Delighted, she brought the girl even more flax to spin, and again, the 3 spinners did all the work in secret. This continued until all the flax in the castle was spun, and the queen happily announced that the girl would marry the prince. On the day of the wedding, the girl, remembering her promise, invited the 3 spinners and introduced them as her aunts. The prince, curious about their strange appearances, asked them what had caused their features to be so unusual. The first woman said, "My foot is so large, because I spent my life pressing the spinning wheel." The second said, "My lip is so big, because I constantly wet the thread with my mouth." The third said, "My thumb is so broad, because I have twisted the thread endlessly." Hearing this, the prince was horrified and declared, "My wife shall never spin again. I do not want her to become like you." And so, thanks to the clever 3 spinners, the girl never had to spin again. She lived happily as a queen, and the 3 spinners vanished, never to be seen again. And thus, they all lived happily ever after. The Nightingale, a fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen. Once upon a time in China, the emperor lived in a grand palace, surrounded by the most beautiful gardens. Beyond the gardens lay a deep forest where a small nightingale with a melodious song resided. Though his kingdom was filled with magnificent treasures, the emperor had never heard of the nightingale. One day, scholars from all over the world wrote about China's wonders, and many praised the nightingale's song, calling it the most beautiful thing in the empire. Curious and embarrassed that he did not know of such a wonder in his own kingdom, the emperor ordered his courtiers to find the nightingale and bring it to him. A humble kitchen maid, who had heard the bird's song while collecting water in the forest, led the courtiers to the nightingale. When it was presented before the emperor, the small, unassuming bird sang so beautifully that the emperor was deeply moved. Tears streamed down his face, and he declared that the nightingale would stay in the palace and sing for him every day. For a time, the nightingale lived in luxury, perched on a golden cage. It was free to fly around the palace, but had to return to sing for the emperor. The entire court adored the nightingale, and its fame spread far and wide. One day, the emperor received a magnificent gift, a mechanical nightingale, encrusted with jewels. It could sing a tune just like the real nightingale, but only the same song over and over. The emperor and his court were mesmerized by the glittering artificial bird and began to favor it over the real one. Feeling neglected, the real nightingale flew away back to the forest. The emperor did not mind at first. He believed that his mechanical bird was just as good. However, after some time, the gears in the artificial bird wore down, and it could no longer sing. The court was heartbroken, but they had no choice but to wind it carefully and only let it play on special occasions. Years passed, and the emperor fell ill. He lay on his deathbed, weak and frail. The silence in the palace was unbearable, and the mechanical bird could no longer sing to bring him comfort. As he prepared for the end, a sweet and familiar melody filled the room. The real nightingale had returned. It perched by his window and sang its beautiful song, bringing him peace. With each note, the emperor felt strength returning to his body. The nightingale's song was a gift of life, and soon, he was well again. The emperor begged the nightingale to stay, but the bird gently refused, saying it must remain free. However, it promised to return and sing whenever the emperor needed it. From that day on, the emperor learned a valuable lesson: true beauty and happiness cannot be replaced by artificial imitations. He cherished the nightingale's visits and ruled with wisdom and kindness, forever grateful for the bird's song. And so, the real nightingale continued to sing for the emperor, not in a golden cage, but as a free bird, bringing joy and life to the palace whenever it was needed. Tatterhood. Once upon a time, there was a king and queen who longed for a child. One day, an old beggar woman told the queen that if she drank from 2 buckets of water placed outside her window, she would have twin daughters. The queen did as she was told, but she didn't notice that one bucket was dirty while the other was clean. Months later, she gave birth to 2 girls. The firstborn, Tatterhood, was a wild and unruly child. She had tangled hair, wore ragged clothes, and carried a wooden spoon like a weapon. She rode around the palace on a goat and was fearless. Her twin sister, in contrast, was beautiful, gentle, and kind. One day, trolls invaded the kingdom and caused havoc. Tatterhood warned everyone not to open the palace doors, but her sister peeked outside. In an instant, the trolls stole her sister's head and replaced it with a calf's head. Brave Tatterhood did not hesitate. She mounted her goat, grabbed her wooden spoon, and rode off to the troll's lair to rescue her sister. She fought fiercely, outwitting the trolls and demanding the return of her sister's real head. The trolls, terrified of her wild nature, surrendered and restored the princess to her true form. After their victory, Tatterhood and her sister set off on new adventures. They traveled across the sea and arrived at a distant kingdom. The king of the land was enchanted by the beautiful twin and wished to marry her. But Tatterhood boldly declared, "Then your prince must marry me first." The prince was reluctant, but he agreed. When their wedding day arrived, Tatterhood transformed. Her wild clothes turned into a dazzling gown, her tangled hair became golden and smooth, and she revealed herself to be the most beautiful woman in the land. The prince, astonished, fell deeply in love with her, and they lived happily ever after. The end. This tale celebrates independence, courage, and inner beauty. Tatterhood's wild spirit is what ultimately leads to her triumph, proving that confidence and bravery are more valuable than outward appearances. The Seven Ravens, a German fairy tale. Once upon a time, there was a man who had 7 sons and longed for a daughter. When his wife finally gave birth to a little girl, the child was weak and small, and the parents feared she would not survive. To save her, the father sent his 7 sons to fetch water from the well. In their haste, the boys accidentally dropped the jug into the deep well. Afraid of returning home empty-handed, they hesitated. The father, impatient and worried, thought his sons had abandoned their task. In his anger, he cursed them, crying out, "I wish you were ravens," and flew away. No sooner had the words left his lips than his sons transformed into 7 black ravens and flew into the sky. The parents regretted the curse, but it was too late, there was no way to undo it. The little girl grew up without knowing about her brothers until she overheard villagers talking about her family's sorrow. She became determined to save her brothers. After learning their fate, she set out on a long and perilous journey, carrying nothing but a small ring from her parents as a token of love. She traveled far, reaching the end of the world where the sun, moon, and stars dwelled. The sun was too hot and scorching, the moon was cold and unkind, but the stars, kind and gentle, gave her a bone from a chicken's foot, telling her it was the key to the glass mountain where her brothers lived. When she arrived at the glass mountain, she found its entrance locked. In her despair, she cut off her little finger and used it as a key, opening the door. Inside, she found a table set with food and drink for 7. She ate a little from each plate and drank from each cup, dropping her parents' ring into the last cup. Soon, the 7 ravens returned. As they prepared to eat, they noticed someone had been there. When the youngest raven found the ring, he recognized it as their parents and said, "If only our sister were here, we would be free." Hearing this, the girl stepped forward, and the moment her brothers saw her, they regained their human forms. Reunited, they joyfully returned home, where their parents welcomed them with tears of happiness. And so, the family was whole again, and they all lived happily ever after.